Okay, welcome to week 4, drawing the female figure. There's no essential difference between the way I would draw a male figure or a female figure. They're pretty much blocked in the same way. Um, at the same time, uh, every person is different. So the way that I respond to a particular model might be different and might influence the way that I interpret them in pencil or the type of line or form that I am working with. But I guess those sort of decisions I try not to be too conscious about. Um, those might be more intuitive type decisions that I make. But you can see me blocking in. I'm mapping things out and looking for those general proportions. I don't want to jump in too quickly describing form or anything very specific. I'm checking all of my proportions first. All my angles and distances. I'm checking to make sure that things fit together nicely. I try to think of everything as being three-dimensional, like a three-dimensional puzzle, and all those parts functioning together, fitting inside one another. And remember that the outline is not the drawing so much. It's the inside stuff, the form, the light, the anatomy. All of those things are what I would really consider the drawing. And my goal is for the form to sort of bulge out toward the middle of the drawing, and to create a sense of relief from the paper. Outlines will sort of belong to the paper more than the middle of the drawing. Um, in other words, I like to emphasize the middle of the drawing, the inside form, and de-emphasize the outline, draw attention away from it. There I'm starting to block in the shadow, and you can see even though I'm using those shadow shapes to help me get a handle on things, I'm not thinking too much yet about value. I'm holding off from putting too many values in the drawing. Later on, I might push up to some darker values. And you can see I'm keeping the strokes nice and broad. Keeping the shadows fairly flat too is important. In the scheme of things, shadows are flatter than the lights. Shadows are better handled as atmospheric areas, and the lights are really where you want to pull out most of the form. You see I dropped a plumb line there to help me place the head, to see how far out the face should come, to see if I dropped a vertical line from the chin down to the arm, where would it intersect? And that helps me, it keeps me from getting the head too disconnected from the body in terms of proportion. To in some way keep referencing back to the torso is the key to keeping making sure that the head continues to relate to the body. When I draw the eyes, I think of them together as almost one body part. You can see I'm drawing across the eyes and trying to understand them in terms of perspective and making sure that those perspective lines relate to the perspective lines of the nose, the mouth, and the chin. It's actually a great idea to learn the rules of perspective if you want to effectively draw the figure. There, it looks like I'm starting to develop a little bit more specificity in the values. I'm pushing down to some dark accents there. It may help if I'm using terminology that you've forgotten about. It may help to go back and reference the first video where I introduce the parts of light and shadow. There, I'm starting to drop in some lights. With parallel hatches. I'm keeping the strokes quick and light and pushing up toward the intensity. I want to make sure that those lights belong to the form, that they don't look too jarring or patchy, but I also, in other words, I want them to be integrated, but I also want to show a passage of light, and I want to push up to a little bit of intensity in the light. And the ultimate goal is form. Sculptural form is the goal. Really pulling out those muscles and bones. And ultimately making poetry out of it. I try to keep the lines long and sort of lyrical and interesting, and I vary the use of my pencil, bearing down in certain places and then barely touching the pencil in other places. Um, I really, once again, really like to show how parts fit into one another and overlap one another. I'm going to show here how the knee overlaps the leg, the lower leg, and how those forms fit together. Pushing up some of the values in the knees, showing the highlights. Pushing that abdomen back a little bit with some halftone, and the more halftone I put into the figure, the darker I might have to push the shadows. Because if the values of my halftones, or those areas where the light is just grazing the surface, if those areas get too dark, then they may get confused with the shadows. So I may go back and darken my shadows the darker my halftones get. That said, I don't want the shadows to get too dark either. Um, if they get too dark, then they may lose their sense of atmosphere, and that's very important in shadows. You want your shadows to be very atmospheric or airy. And once again, emphasizing the core of the shadow along the terminator really allows for more atmosphere in the shadow mass. I think I was tilting my easel forward a little bit because I was catching glare on the graphite a little bit. Alright, I'm going to start developing the head a little bit. You can see the underplane of the chin is catching shadow. Cast shadow from the ear. Underplanes of the back of the head are casting shadows. Starting to move in with a little bit of the white pencil. Right here I've zoomed in a little bit to show you how I build the head. I decided to rebuild the mouth. Just like with the eye, I don't like to close the lips off as a closed kind of heart shape either. I want to instead look at the three-dimensional aspects of the lips and simply form the shadows of the mouth. Same thing with the eyes and nose. You'll see I'm not really going to close off the shape around the eyes very much. I want to avoid that sort of flat football shape of the opening of the eyes, and instead I want to draw attention to the three-dimensional aspects of the eye, the eyeball turning under. Faces I really like to build impressionistically at first. Facial features are so delicate and so full of life and movement, and so I tend to give facial features softer edges, in context of a figure drawing. And here I've zoomed in on the torso just to show you some of the subtlety of what I'm doing there. I really love the form of rib cages and those little tiny underplanes that catch halftone. They're just really fun to develop. And strengthening my passage of light there. Nice broad rapid strokes still. And there it is, the whole drawing. Now let's see what you come up with.